All right, everyone, let's get this show on the road. I'm Patrick Jones, and I'm representing the Institute for Public Policy, and I'm also representing the School of Business and Accounting. And this is the third of a series of talks we've had this spring that has brought business leaders and entrepreneurs to an audience of the university, which is students, friends, faculty, staff. And I think you're going to really enjoy tonight when we hear from Mr. Dan Roark, a person I've known for a while, about his, lack of a better word, a saga in his business career, which I hope will be an inspiration to you all. So for those of you who were here last time, you students, I think a few of you were, you might remember that I've put out three things that we'd like to take away from tonight. One is it's a learning experience, of course. We are at a university, and this is just another way of learning, and perhaps a really exciting way that supplements what you see in the classroom. Second thing I'd like you to take away is to maybe take a breath of inspiration with you as you leave the building, because I think what you're going to hear tonight from Dan is really that inspiring, how a young man from Spokane has done what he's done. The third thing I'd like you to take away is to have a little bit of fun. And we have food for all of you, but we're going to save it to the end. So for those of you who have classes tonight, we're going to break right at 6:45. So you'll have 15 minutes to dine and dash, so to speak. But we don't want you to dash too much, because one of the challenges I'd like to throw out to you that I threw out to the group a month ago is that we hope part of having fun is talking to people you don't know. And these could be people like me. These could be people from the community. These could be our president. I'm sure she'd like to meet some of the students here. So while you're balancing a plate of food in one hand, hopefully you'll be able to shake the hands of somebody new. So with that, we're going to have a format that's the following. We're going to hear from President McMahan. Then I'm going to introduce Dan Roark, our speaker. Dan is going to present his slides for anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes, something like that. And then Professor Jeff Culver. Jeff, could you stand up and just let people know, if you don't know Professor Culver, he's quite an institution around here, teaching statistics for many years. And Professor Culver is going to then pose some questions to Dan, and then he's going to stop and let you ask questions. So I hope you'll find some questions as you listen to what Dan Roark is telling you about his experience in the world that he's inhabited for the last 40 years. With that, I'm going to introduce the 27th president of Eastern Washington University, Dr. Sheri McMahan. If you get a big round of applause to our president.
Patrick said fun, and I am all in. I don't know about you. Yeah? You are. I've seen some of you before, I think last time when we were here together, so it's wonderful to see you again. Also, thank you to the faculty and from the School of Business and our Institute for Public Policy and Economic Analysis for organizing the speakers series. It's my understanding it's the last one, and they have been an enormous success. So let's give them a round of applause here. Thank you. We know it's a wonderful opportunity for our students, faculty, and community to gain valuable insights from the most innovative and successful leaders in our business community. We are committed at Eastern to making experiential learning an essential, critical part of your student development. So we are really excited about connecting what you hear about in the classroom with what's going on in the real world, and beginning that whole experience, right? You're learning from the best of the best to gain those practical insights and be inspired yourself to pursue your own dreams, right? I know we have our, what was it called? The event tomorrow night? Eagles pitch, right? Where you're really pitching something with the grand prize structure up to $50,000. That is so incredible and how inspiring. So good luck to our contestants tomorrow for that. Yeah, that's great. And Dan, we are honored to have you present tonight. Thank you for your leadership in the community. We know that you have been both a Whitworth Pirate and a WSU Coug, but tonight you are an Eastern Eagle. Yes, right? So thank you for returning to Spokane and sharing your message with us. So again, thank you to all. Thank you to Eagle Productions and everybody that's coordinated this, our food service and servers out there for providing this opportunity for us to break bread and share conversation together. So thank you so much, Patrick. Enjoy.
Dan, would you mind coming up here? So we didn't show you can leap up or go around the back. So it's my pleasure to formally introduce Dan Roark. Just a bit of bio about Dan. In 1994, probably a few years before a few of you in the room were born, Dan co-founded something called CCS Automation in Torrance, California. I think that's in the LA area. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. A company that focused on laboratory automation for pharmaceutical biotechnology and reference labs. In 2000, so a short 6 years later, he sold that company to PerkinElmer, a large multinational based in Massachusetts that specializes in human and environmental health. He then didn't stop. He founded a company called Matrical Bioscience that focused on automated storage for biological samples and new drug candidates. After forming that with his partner, Kevin Oldenburg, they moved the company to Spokane in 2004, and that's where I got to know Dan. In 2013, they sold the company to Brooks Automation, also based in Massachusetts. And then in 2017, we have a third act where Dan is taken over the reins, something he'll talk about tonight, Gestalt Diagnostics here in Spokane. So a bit of personal background about Dan. He's, as you may have heard, a Spokane native. He's a graduate of Shadle Park, so go Highlanders, if anybody is in the room from North Spokane. He received a bachelor's degree in biochemistry from Whitworth and a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from WSU. Dan has 3 adult children, and Dan, is your mother in the audience tonight?
She is.
Would Mrs. Roark please stand? There she is. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you for coming. So I asked Dan why he came back to Spokane after 2 decades abroad in California and Massachusetts. And he listed 3 reasons: my family, the lifestyle we enjoy in Spokane, and Spokane's ecosystem, which I think I know what he means, but I'll let him explain that. And then I didn't ask him, but I wondered why Dan simply hasn't retired and enjoyed his young grandchildren. And I found the answer actually in doing some research on Dan in an interview he gave to the Journal of Business a couple of years ago. He says, quote, "I'm a serial entrepreneur, which means I'm dumb enough to try it again and again." So Dan, I don't think that's quite true, but it's a good line, and perhaps you can elaborate. So the floor is yours, Dan. Welcome to Eastern.
All right. Well, thanks, Patrick. Yeah, it's been a fun odyssey. And my caption here, I say, what they don't tell you in school about being an entrepreneur. Maybe I should say what they don't tell you in life about being an entrepreneur. So, you can get all the book knowledge, but until you go live it, you don't really know it. And so to me, many times, and Marcy's my significant other. She's in the crowd as well. So I want to thank her for all the support she gives me. And I also have my oldest son is a banker here in town, and he just showed up too. So anyway, so in case anybody attacks me, I've got backup. So, but, being an entrepreneur feels like you're on a high wire a lot of the time. And what I mean by that, my first two businesses, we self-funded. We didn't raise external funds, which meant you often went without, I like to say, bologna sandwiches were a good day sometimes. You weren't always getting steak. So, you had to fund payroll, and everybody expects to get paid. And that sometimes means you don't as an entrepreneur. And I found it very fascinating, all the way up to Elon Musk and guys at the top of their game. They've all struggled. Every business idea is a good idea until it isn't. One of my favorite lines is Mike Tyson: everybody has a game plan until they get punched in the face. And that happens in business repeatedly. And I think you have to have a really thick skin, and you have to be willing to, just keep going and finding new partners and, encouraging your employees to really, carry the ball for you, so to speak. I'm a sports guy, so you'll have to put up with some sports analogies tonight. But I think that's really important that, as you build a team, it's the team that wins. And as an entrepreneur, you absolutely do not do it alone. So anyways, my life has been a life of a lot of travel. I've got 3 million miles on 2 airlines, actual miles. So that's a lot of time in a tin can, I like to say. I've been on most continents, I guess. I'm currently working on projects in India, in China. Most, our customers today are in North America, but you have to think beyond. I've had my own offices in England and in Japan. We are the most spoiled people on the planet because everybody will speak our language, which I can't figure Chinese out. I can tell you that. So that's very helpful. But, the connections you make in life are what I think life is all about. And I've made a lot of great connections, and my family's gotten to meet a lot of them, and they're all amazing people. I have a friend in Korea who's a world class climber. He's climbed, all 7 summits, and, has a fantastic business there in the life science industry. So at any rate, so I'll kind of back it up a bit. So back in the 90s, the Human Genome Project was something that I latched onto as a very exciting venture. And that was really about, better medicine was the goal. And now today, through my talk, you'll see a little bit of kind of what that means in today's world. But these 2 guys were customers of mine, and they were at the top of the list. In the world back in 2000, thereabouts. They were routinely being dined with Bill Clinton and the likes, and then they would call me when my machine would break. And Craig would go, "What the heck?" And I go, "Well, what'd you guys do?" But, it was a 13-year effort around the globe. So I worked with the folks in the UK. I worked with the folks in Germany at Max Planck. Japan, I don't know, it's a long list. It was really exciting to see all of the energy behind it. And Craig was one of the guys that had an ego the size of, the Empire State Building. So his DNA was what he chose with his company Celera to actually, sequence. I'm curious how he's doing today, but only because he's a bit older now. And, he was a phenomenal fundraiser. And then there was Francis Collin, who was kind of the quiet scientist that was extremely bright, that went on to take over the NIH. This was a $3 billion effort, and it cost $100 million for the first genome. And now today, you can order, DNA profiling off of Amazon. So, but healthcare costs in the world, or in North America, I'll focus on that, are almost 20% of our GDP. or gross domestic product, right? So 20% of our dollars spent are on healthcare, which is a huge number. Watson and Crick, this was the first draft was finished 50 years after they received the Nobel Peace Prize for, confirming what DNA structure is. So again, the ultimate goal of this project was really improving health through genomics research. And it's amazing to me. We have 3 billion base pairs in every cell in our body. If you were to stack up phone books, focus on the New York City phone book, which used to be really big. I don't see phone books anymore, but you would have to stack 30 of those high to account for how much DNA is in one cell. So just think about that for a minute. And if you look at everyone on the planet, 99.9% of our DNA is identical. So it's the 0.1% that makes us unique. So in the world of disease, that's really important to think about. What I built with my first company was really factory level automation. I like to say conveyorized cooking, if you will. Think of a kitchen. We were doing DNA isolation to feed sequencers at the Broad Institute, as we show in this picture here. And they paid millions of dollars for this, and we did 1 million samples a day. And when I started in the 90s, early 90s, with high throughput screening, switching over to the pharma side here, they said, we're going to do 10,000 samples a day. And everybody laughed because everything was in test tubes. I started my career going to like the New York Blood Center, talk about going to a crazy McDonald's kind of operation. And blood samples were all over, literally on the floor. And that was the world back then. But so this was a really fun project, and the outcome of it has been tremendous. So when you look at drug development and what has happened, I think everybody recognizes these two guys, Magic Johnson. He's lived now almost 35 years with AIDS. 35 years. I remember when AIDS, when I was in grad school, they were trying to figure out, what it was and how serious it was and how much of a killer it was. And when he went live and said, hey, I've got AIDS, it was a death sentence. It's like, hey, he's done playing. People can't contact him, and now, today, healthy as a horse, so to speak. Phil Mickelson, one of the best golfers in the world. How do you be one of the best golfers in the world with rheumatoid arthritis, right? So the best drug for that came out of Seattle. At Immunex. So today it costs in the neighborhood of $2 billion to bring a drug to market. And if you see that first line there, by the way, only 9% of them make it. Look up online the top 10 that failed last year. Talk about, companies crying in their soup at lunch. They can be in the third stage of clinical trials, and they can fail. Our bodies are so complex. You make a drug that's for heart, or I'll say weight loss, right? And the fen, if anybody remembers that, and how then it had caused heart damage. So literally, we're a part of the early process of toxicology testing from vivariums with mice all the way to monkeys to confirm that, hey, these molecules actually, are focused where they need to, and they don't have any bad side effects. And of course, look at the coronavirus. We're still discovering things about side effects because how quickly we rush that to save lives. So R&D budgets are huge with pharma. My initial understanding of that was Pfizer saying, well, we really want to buy your instrument, but it's 10 inches too deep. We can't fit it in our lab. And I'm like, well, figure it out. And they're like, well, how much more does it cost to make it 10 inches smaller? And so, I talked about it from an engineering standpoint. I said, no, 75 grand and it costs us probably 20. I don't know. But they're like, fine, we don't care. They cared. They wanted the solution, right? So pharma and, dealing in the pharma industry has been, a part of my life from the early days. With my second business, Patrick talked about automated biobanks. What is an automated biobank? I like to say if you go to Costco and you go in the cold freezer, it's like that, but you can't go in. Why can't you go in? Because they're down to cryogenic temperatures. Ted Williams is in one of them, literally. He's he's cryo stored. So we stored down to minus 132. So below, we'd say the glass transition phase, below where viruses can actually move. So, DNA and other things you can store, even at room temperature, but they often store them much colder. And sort of the folklore around building automated freezers, mechanical minus 80 refrigeration is extensively used in research. And minus 80 that's the temperature of dry ice. So they were trying to mimic that because of how well that preserved things for the duration, I'll say. And we have, samples like in this system at the UK Biobank, 10 million specimen stored in it. So there's some really interesting biobank, gene bank, and even sperm bank projects. So motility for sperm, and the whole getting pregnant is not as easy as we all thought it was when we were in high school for a lot of people, right? But in Iceland, I like to say a population that's very static, a gene pool that doesn't move a lot, because who wants to move to Iceland? The people from Iceland, yeah. So that makes them a very interesting population to study, right? Because they don't have a lot of genetic variation. So heart disease, cancer, and schizophrenia. A project with the U.S. Army, the Million Veterans Program, for all the veterans that were in the, I like to say, sandbox, or in the Gulf Wars, at Jamaica Plains, in Boston, 4 million specimen. We built that off of Trent. It took 6 truck and trailers to get that to the East Coast. It was like installing the ship in a bottle. It was literally that. We had to squeeze it through the side of a building and then reconstruct what we built here and tested here or there. The other ones, studying, population genomics has been a big topic for 20 years, and we're learning a lot from that. So now you can order gene profiles. This is a customer of mine. This is Myriad Genetics in Salt Lake City, but they have panels, cancer panels, they call them now. So now they can focus on genes, tied to specific types of cancer, that you might get. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But, so we talked about 3 billion base pairs. There's actually about 20,000 genes that codes for, which then makes the proteins up that do the work for us to get us to do what we do. Fighting disease, it's interesting to note that heart disease has dropped by 70% in 60 years. I'm still trying to figure this one out. Women live longer than us guys. Do you guys know that? 76 years around the world for women, 73 for us, and then it multiplies by 3 if you're in North America. So we're getting a 3-year advantage being from the U.S. So take our win. So breast and ovarian cancer diagnostic tests, you can get those now for $100. And on Black Friday, one of the top 5 sellers is, getting your DNA profile done. So digital healthcare, big topic today, right? This is where we're heavily focused with my current business. And I'll talk about that a lot. Big data to me, anybody, data lakes, anybody know what that is? I think it's a lake, you just put all your data in it, I'm not sure. It's a really interesting topic. I now have PhD data scientists on our team, guys that can construct algorithms that we can, count things, and we'll talk about that. Artificial intelligence obviously is huge, not just in healthcare. Now every company has to have an AI plan, right? We've been building AI for 3 years, and we have competitors that have raised $400 million to build AI for cancer diagnostics, that they didn't have the front end workflow like we build, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But so they did cancer panels for prostate cancer, our only FDA-approved drug, or not drug, but diagnostic test in pathology. Telemedicine, surgery robotics that can be, remotely controlled. It's amazing the tech that's available today. And, obviously, the self-diagnosis with ChatGPT. There's examples of parents out diagnosing physicians because they know the intricacies of what their kids have from a disease standpoint. Wearable devices, they're everywhere, my smartwatch, right? And there's just so many different things. I looked at a company in California that was building, a competitive product for diabetics, using micro technology so you don't have to, give yourself a shot or take something else. So it's amazing where all that has gone. And then things that we're now starting to focus on in my current business on the research side is patient drug matching, or not drug matching and clinical trial finding for patients that don't have any hope with current drugs on the market. So this is a really big topic. So Gestalt, this is my current business. So inland imaging, a pillar in our community. There are 135 radiologists across multiple states and about 900 or so employees. They built their own workflow solution when radiology digitized about 20 years ago. And they thought, their two leaders said, we could really leverage this for pathology. So really it's accelerating, the diagnosis and treatment of cancer. Physicians are wonderful people. I was almost one of them. I got pneumonia when I was in high school from Deaconess Hospital. The doc and I both got pneumonia from a patient, and I went, I didn't see a lot of healthy people this summer. I think I'll look at engineering. So what does it mean, medical imaging or digitizing pathology? So the world of pathology today is a microscope world. That's two guys doing a consult, two docs saying, hey, Bob, what do you see? Well, I think it's stage 1. What do you think? So they do that with Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours to be an expert, right? I call it pattern recognition, which is something that I think computers are pretty good at. And so some of the downside of today's technology, which is the microscope, is you've got this glass slide that you're shipping around. Unlike radiology, today the glass slide doesn't go away. In radiology, the film went away, right? So they still have to deal with that, but now we're digitizing that. And on the right-hand side, this is what a doctor, was looking at in our solution. I like to say it's called the Costco upgrade. He gets the big screen. Or in our case, we give them a couple of them so they can see all of their cases, and then they can see the actual tissue on a 28 or more inch monitor. And then, we archive all these images, which are huge. The reason it took so long for pathology to digitize, you're talking about a gigabyte of data for one slide. So orders of magnitude bigger than in radiology. But now we look at what's happened in the world of Amazon and Google. We're now on the Google Cloud platform, or if we're cool, we say the GPC. or whatever. Anyways, and then we're, Microsoft, Google, all the big tech companies, Oracle, who bought Cerner 2 years ago for $35 billion. We're a partner with Cerner because they provide the medical systems for these doctors to do their work in. So things that we're trying to advance, it takes 6 weeks from first exam to getting a diagnosis and hopefully getting a treatment course put together for a patient. This was just announced a couple of weeks ago at a conference. The University of Texas Medical Branch, radiology, again, has been digital for 20 years. They're now realizing that, hey, if they unite with pathology, these physicians can share this information, and they're actually finding additional opportunities for revenue, which is around better testing and better patient outcomes. And so they're very excited about that, and we're partnering with 2 really large groups, United Healthcare being one of them, with our platform. So what is computational pathology? I think it took me 2 years to figure this out. It's really just counting stuff. And in this example, what are we counting? I like to say we're counting 1 cowboy, some sheep, 1 dog, and then we're looking at, sizes. And so we call that, kind of color normalization, which is what you have to do with up to 100 different stains in the world of pathology based upon the biopsy specimen that you have. And then you're trying to identify or detect, what you're really looking at. So is this a prostate specimen in our world, or is it thyroid? And then we segment every cell. 1 piece of glass has 5 million cells on it. 1 piece of glass. They say that's like 4 football fields of data. And then we try and extract the important features, which cells are normal and which ones aren't normal. And then, of course, we quantify or grade those. This is kind of how we train an algorithm. We like to say, hey, give me a ground truth. Give me a healthy patient. Now give me a worst case scenario for cancer patient. And then we annotate that, or we actually, each cell that's bad will mark that. And so then we try and, with algorithms that we build, we then try and classify based upon that. So it's a lot of turns with the data in order to do that. So millions of reactions, or millions of steps. And again, we've now got annotated slides with 5 million. All 5 million cells on it are annotated. We have our own algorithms just to look at when cells are dividing, as an example. So you can see how fast, say, a tumor is proliferating or growing. I think this is a pretty cool piece of tech for the physician. Why not call out the cancer spots for him so that he can see them straight away when he opens up the case, because he can't do that when he's looking for them with his microscope. Financial metrics. Every business needs to do this and understand this. I'm a guy that took 1 class, pass fail, for business. My dad was a business guy. How many people in here have family businesses or entrepreneurs in their family? I think it should be most of us. Come on. Yeah. Anyways, understanding your financials, your profit loss, being able to read financial statements, that wasn't something I was born to do, but I figured it out. It took a while. I enjoyed organic chemistry better than sitting through a business class. But you have to be able to get loans from your banker, and you have to be able to convince him that you're a solid bet for him to go with you. So these are really important metrics. I like to say, building for success means, what kind of IP can you build in your business? So my current business, we have 8 patents that have issued. We have more that are pending. Those are kind of pillars that you can stand on to kind of, stake your turf. Vertical integration versus vendors. Little companies don't stand alone. Big companies don't stand alone. The biggest of companies leverage their vendors the best. When I've sold to big companies, the first thing they want to do is, well, if you make it for this much money in California, what if we take it to Asia? And then I bring up things like, what's the cost of quality? Anybody have a guess? My guess is zero. If you build it right the first time, it doesn't cost you anything, right? If you build it wrong the first time, the second time, now you're spending money. I mean, you're spending what you knew you would spend if you build it right the first time, but everybody has rework. And that's the tough thing about building hardware. Same thing with software. It's even harder, I think, because you can't see it. Drives me nuts. I have to look at the guys and say, okay, what'd you get done today? Oh, well, we did this. Well, show me. Well, we can't show you. It's not working yet. Anyways, so, how do you scale is really important. So in the world of pathology, if they're looking at the digital image, right, of the tissue, if they move that on one screen, like, on your computer, we have like 1,000 images that we're tying together. Think of Bing Maps or Google Maps when you're looking down from Google Earth and you're restitching that together as you drive down to your backyard or into your bedroom. That's what we're doing for the pathologist. And so if we don't stay ahead of him with that stitching, he gets dizzy. It's like getting seasick. And he'll go, I can't use this. It doesn't work. So those are really important things. Service, I didn't learn this with my first business right away, but it's really a cash cow. And what does that mean? That means that it doesn't cost you as much to support things. Think of when you go to Best Buy or Fred's Appliance and you order appliances, right? And they're like, do you want the service agreement? And you're like, well, how much is it going to cost if it breaks? And they go, a lot. And you go, okay, well, sure, but it doesn't break very much, right? So anyway, so that's a good part of your revenue. And then you should do things like a warranty holdback. What does that mean? You know that you're going to have some expense, plan for that expense in your budget. That's important. So I know we're going to have some Q&A too, but kind of what are some traits for good employees? I always say not be a whiner is always good. Cool under pressure is another one I like. Humble is probably at the top of the list because if guys, are big-headed, then they, infighting is the worst thing that can happen in a company. I like people who are enthusiastic, and I like to give everybody. I'm not you can't be a micromanager. We were talking about this just before I came up, but if you're a micromanager, how do you do that as you grow a business? If you have 200 plus employees, you can't do it. You'll go nuts. My first partner was a micromanager, and it almost drove him insane. I'm like, dude, you can't do it. Just let it go. These guys are bright guys. Let them either win or fail on their own. They want to win, right? Good communicators, confident, kind of all of those things to me are important traits. And I said humble. So I invested in a company and then I got really active in it as it was losing money. Everybody said, my family would always say, well, my dad, he's a science guy. I don't know what he does. And so I bought into a motorcycle company. They go, well, that's cool. I go, yeah, but we're losing money. Well, we didn't know our costs. We didn't have a good bill of materials. Our vendors' relationship sucked. So Tom Simpson and I, we were at the water cooler one day and said, what happened? But Ezra Eckhart's a buddy. He was involved in that as well. He runs Teachers Credit Union. We all thought we were going to ride snow bikes. None of us ever got on the damn things. I still have one in my garage somewhere. But it's good to be humble but it was a good experiment. And they looked really cool. That's why we got into it. What are some characteristics of an entrepreneur? Curiosity, be dumb enough to try. I think Patrick pointed that out earlier. I think having a long-term focus is really important. Here's where I am today, or here's where we are today, but here's where we're trying to go, and being able to, Elon Musk that to the world, if you will. Risk tolerance. My risk tolerance is a lot higher than others because if I stay in it, I really feel like I can make it work. And it's about the partners that you have, not just your teammates, but like we have these scientific advisors today that are medical directors, at Henry Ford Hospital, at Intermountain Healthcare. We're working with Northwell Health, one of the biggest healthcare on the East Coast. They've got 300 pathologists that are deploying our solution. And their CEO is Mike, I forget his last name now. I met him, but he's always the number one healthcare guy in America every year. And he was like, they were ground zero for COVID. He goes, I was around COVID patients every day for like 120 days. He worked nonstop trying to save lives. So, persistence. But, I think that's kind of what I got, I think. Other than, anybody remember who John Wooden was? Yeah. So he said, if you're not making mistakes, then you're not doing anything. And I can imagine, because I've seen some of his, practice, rollbacks, he was relentless. But, his teams won more championships at UCLA than anywhere. And then Steve Jobs said, the only way to do great work is to love what you do. And I think that's really important. So that's what I got.
Thank you, Dan. That's more than a lot. Jeff, if we can take about 10 minutes of Q&A from you, and then we want to open it up to everybody in the room. I'm sure you've got some questions after you just heard Dan cover so much ground. So take it away, Jeff.
Hello, Dan. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. So when I was putting these questions together, I reflected back on questions that my students have asked me over the years. And I've noticed that when I was putting the questions together, how many of my students have expressed a desire to be entrepreneurs, many more than when I was in school myself. So a lot of these questions have come along that specific topic line. So the first one is kind of the same question everybody asks of somebody that's an entrepreneur is, what are your primary expectations when it comes to hiring recent university graduates?
Well, don't be a whiner. I think I said that.
Yeah.
Well, you get all the dirt jobs initially, right? You got to clean up. No, I'm kidding. I think you want students, you want people, well, when I got my first job, I'll start with the softball answer. When I just before I got made the offer, they said, well, if you get the job, would you buy a ski boat? That was in my interview with my boss. And I said, does that get me the job? If so, I won't get the car. I'll just keep riding my bike, I think, people who are hungry, that have a lot of drive, and initiative. I'm not a micromanager. I don't, I might not see some of my guys for days. I was gone for 2 weeks. So, do I know what they were doing for 2 weeks? Nope. Did I talk to them on the phone? Yep. But, you want folks that want to get out of bed and get after it. And you want people who are reliable. People work themselves off the team if they don't deliver repeatedly.
Work themselves off the team.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Okay, so what are some of the interviewing mistakes you have seen entry-level candidates make?
Be late. That's one. That doesn't impress. Non-stop talking.
Usually about themselves.
I think being a good listener is really important. My son back there may say I'm not a very good listener, though, so you'd have to ask him. But I think being a good listener, interviewing, you want to, you want to show high energy, and you want to try and understand what the job is. Ask questions about what you would be doing. and where they see you in a couple of years, and then where you see yourself in a couple of years.
I see a lot of them go in and spend 20 minutes talking about themselves. Okay, so share one thing, good or bad, that caught you completely by surprise in your entrepreneurial journey.
Being broke. Well, working till 2 a.m., like with machines that didn't work for the Human Genome Project, and the customers coming in the morning and it's 2 a.m. and you're going back to a third Red Bull, and it's still not working, and you got like 5 guys around the machine with you, and it's smoking, and but by morning you got it running. Similarly, I was in Zurich, Switzerland, shipped a machine there. We set it up, worked all night, and it worked for the 20 minutes it needed to. And then right after he left, it died again, so, that's the world of robotics a bit. But, you make these things better over time, but shipping things around is hard. So, those things. And then I would say, travel is hard. Always, you've got to be front of center with customers to really understand what they're doing. And it's not easy to be gone when you want to be home.
That high involvement purchase decisions usually, they want to see your face.
Yep.
At least yours, not mine.
Yep.
So if we want to open it up to some questions now, want to put your hands up and I'll call on you. We can ask some questions to Dan while we have them. Anybody? Bueller? Young man?
So how did you learn how to run a business? Granted that your college degree wasn't in the business field.
Yeah. Yeah.
There we go. So how did you learn how to run a business without having a college degree necessarily in the topic of business? Did you have a mentor or somebody to follow in a path, reading books, etc.?
Yeah. When I first kind of realized that business kind of worked for me in my head I was at the Mayo Clinic with a salesperson demonstrating a machine that I had put a lot of the capabilities into. And I kept turning to the salesperson and said, okay, well, I made it work. Now you tell him how to buy it. Right. And she just kept going, okay, well, do you like it or not? She didn't really have anything to say. And I'm like, well, so I literally just said, all right, here's what we can do. And I just said, Dr. Gal, would you buy this for this price if, with all the features, if we could deliver this to you? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, we'll write it up. And that's what we did. So I learned to write kind of statements of work as an engineer about what something could do or, what it is supposed to do. And I kind of went from that. And then I've joked through the years that you can design a product on a napkin, and I could actually get a medical director or a head of research to say, if you can build that, I will give you, I would say, well, I need 50% down, because I estimated what my costs were. And I said, well, if I can cover my costs for the build, we can use the rest of the money to, that the build cost pays salaries. That additional costs, we put in the bank for quote unquote rainy days, but it was really to keep adding more employees and growing the business. That's kind of why you sell something at the end of the day, because you kept thinking, well, I'm going to get a better paycheck, but you keep, putting it back into the business. So.
Anybody? Questions?
I've got a question. Dan, who would you recommend, or what would you recommend to these young students, young professionals, if they have an idea? Who would their circle of influence be, and who should they go to with that next golden widget or whatever it is?
Yeah. Well, we have a great ecosystem here in Spokane, so, I know you guys have a pitch weekend coming up, there's a lot of opportunities like that where you can get some initial funding based upon winning the contest, like 25 grand or more with some of these. There's CoMotion. There's a group that Avista's behind, and several others in the community are behind, kind of for early seed funding. Tom Simpson, has put together like Sparts Weekend, and there's a bunch of folks involved in it now. And that was here, I don't remember, 3 or 4 months ago, whatever it was. And the guy who won that is a lawyer who wants to build better software for helping get people out of jail faster, and getting them in front of a judge for a judgment so they can go back to work and not lose their job, as an example, which is a really cool idea. And he only came to that because he's in that profession. And so and he worked that out at a Sparks Weekend. But there's a lot of ways you can pitch ideas here in Spokane. And there's Spokane Angel Alliance, where we meet, 6-8 times a year. And, you're welcome to come to those lunches. You get a free sandwich, talk to guys like me. We like to hear your ideas. We like to hear your crazy ideas, just like our crazy ideas. You're a younger version of us, really, so keep us in the game. Yeah.
Has anybody got an idea that they're thinking about launching on an entrepreneurial level? That they have a question that they'd like to ask? How about in the middle? Somebody got a question in the middle of the room there? You want me to ask some more of my questions? No? Anything? Okay. That young man in the blue there? Yeah.
I was just wondering, you said you got your wife here and your mom here. Kind of just wondering who's been your biggest supporter going through being an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Who's been the biggest supporter of his entrepreneurship? Okay.
Marcy, my mom, dad, my kids, they've been around when I was gone. And, I learned to do trips to Korea and back in 4 days, figure that one out, so that you could be around your kids and not have them think you were never around. That's hard stuff you got to do, though. And I was there long enough to kiss the baby to get the deal done and turn around and hop on a plane and, step back into my, being a good dad mode, or certainly trying,
Anyone else? Questions?
Is there going to be a number 4?
Well, I'm still trying to deal with number 3. This one's just at the cusp. We're still losing money, but we've got some great customers, and the tech has really come a long ways. I don't see me being this active again, but I don't see me just sitting on the beach either. But this one's, it's got my attention for quite a while, I think.
Questions? Yes, way in the back there. Thank you, sir.
So, Dan, you talked about the ecosystem in Spokane. You think it's pretty good. What would be the shortcomings, do you think, of the Spokane community ecosystem in terms of trying to attract other life sciences companies to here? So what are the pluses here, and what are some of those things that we need to continue to work on?
Well, so from a plus standpoint, we have two. So I've been here since 2004, thereabouts. We have 2 medical schools here, which we didn't have then. We have a great hospital system, and there's a lot of research that happens out of that. At a university level, I would love to see more PhD programs, which drive NIH funds about $35 billion a year in research, which funds a lot of universities. So to the extent that we can expand what we're doing at a PhD level, those guys, Ed Schweitzer was a PhD at Eastern, look at the business he's built, and that's just one example. It's at the stage my business is in. If I moved to Silicon Valley, or if I did that 2 years ago with this business, I would have been able to raise $25+ million pretty quickly. I've raised 10 million with this business, mostly local money. And if you're not from Seattle, they'll look at you, and they are starting to write some checks. But they want to, they want to be able to golf with you. And that may sound, not right. They want to really be able to touch you easily. But, with the world since the pandemic, I think it's getting easier because, everybody can hop on a Zoom. But there's still no replacement for face-to-face time. So that to me is a challenge in terms of building big business. And then, having successes here locally, to brag about that to pull in these folks. And we've got, an entrepreneur here who sold a business for $10 billion a couple of years ago. And it was a pharma company. And he sold that business with a drug in mind that didn't, and he sold it to Eli Lilly, and it didn't go forward. So, hey, he got out, he got his exit, and it's very common. But then they also find that drug might have a different, 5 years from now, it might be used for something they didn't even think of then. Because if you look at the most successful drug on the market, Keytruda from Merck, or one of the most successful, it was initially for breast cancer. It now has 32 indications. So 32 different types of disease that it is used to treat in various formulations.
Could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How do you go about protecting yourself? I mean, as you become more and more successful, what types of things do you do to protect yourself from competition?
Well, patents are the only way you can really try and protect yourself. Our first customer with this product got bought by an AI company who then has basically ripped off what we built. But our patents on that part of the technology haven't issued yet. So you just kind of smile and wait. And you hope that you can come back and you can defend that and cause them to take a license and get some pretty good upfront fees for the work you've done. But there's you can't cry in your soup. You got to keep rolling. And the IP takes a lot of different flavors. And we've got some really bright minds on our team. So I think again, business is a people process or a people business, where people work with people that they trust, and people see, like Northwell, they showed their product to Northwell and they said, yeah, we know you're using Gestalt, but we have that. You don't need to get it from them. And they're like, well, why does it look so similar to theirs? So the scruples of it, there are people that have scruples, is what I'm saying, which is good.
Yes, young man.
You guys hear me? So my question is related to the question that was asked before, where you mentioned, there's the medical infrastructure, and you would like to see more PhD programs in Eastern. So what would you say? So we're currently in the process of thinking about where Eastern should go. So what would you say future investment should be to interface for Eastern, to interface with the medical community better? How can we do this?
Well, internships, at a low level for engineers, right? To bring them on board and get them some training and try and get them to stay in Spokane. So of all of our high-tech people that we train up here don't run off to Seattle and beyond. We've held on to some great students from Eastern, from Washington State, and others, which to me is really important, is to kind of keep that homegrown talent here if we can. We have building the tech takes time. Like the sleep center we have here is a great resource, and they're doing some really cool stuff. They relocated here. So we're getting some of that, relocating businesses here. But, like Steve Jobs and, some of these other guys that have hit it out of the park, I can think of Boise and Micron as well. They put Boise on the tech scene, one company. Ed Schweitzer put, Pullman on the map, right? So we've got some big businesses here. Spokane feels a little spread out, valley-wise or whatever, but, we've got some great businesses here already. But, to the extent we can add more programs that that can go after NIH money, that churns out IP that companies like mine that could take advantage of if they're in, medical imaging, as an example.
Jeff, one more question. I think we have time for one more question. Anybody? Okay, then, Dwaning, do you want to come up with the gifts? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
All right, folks, so ends our formal part of the evening. Dan, I hope you'll stick around for a few more minutes and take questions from people who really had a question, didn't quite get it out of their system yet. And we now have lots of food. People to your right are getting that set up. And so for those students who have classes, I think we should let them be at the head of the line. So with that, thank you once again. We hope to continue these events in the fall, and we'll just ask you to stay tuned. With that, let's enjoy the mingling and balance that plate and a handshake with somebody you don't know. Thank you so much.